Hey, Johnny, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite movies, and technically, this will be my 500th video. Yes, 500. That's a big deal. So, I have decided to do a movie review on a classic movie that I watched and I really, really loved. And the first one that came to mind was Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. So, The Shining is a horror movie made by legendary director Stanley Kubrick, who is one of my favorite directors of all times, up there with Christopher Nolan, David Lynch, maybe Andrei Tarkovsky as well. So Stanley Kubrick is a very versatile but also very abstract and artistic director who had been one of the most influential directors of cinematic history ever. And Stanley Kubrick is a really experimental and abstract director who perfectly balances between the art and the story, and his movies usually dabble into themes of humanity, reality, morality, and this movie is no exception. And also, Stanley Kubrick is so ahead of his time, super ahead of his time. He made movies like 2001: A Space Odyssey, a classic sci-fi movie about evolution and humanity. He also made other classics such as A Clockwork Orange and Barry Lyndon and Doctor Strangelove and Eyes Wide Shut, and the list goes on. And then we have The Shining, made in the year 1980. And also Full Metal Jacket, also a great movie. Almost forgot. So yeah, this movie is truly one of the best horror movies of all time. And even if it's not the best horror movie of all time, at least it's in the top three with The Exorcist and Alien. So yeah, this movie is can I even say horror? I mean, it's kind of horror, but it's not the horror that you might actually expect from a horror movie. It doesn't have the jump scares, it doesn't have monsters, it doesn't have tangible creatures chasing after you, killing you. It's rather psychological. It's rather cerebral, may I say. And what's kind of weird or crazy about this great horror movie is that it is actually adapted from Stephen King's novel of the same name. Stephen King is one of the greatest novelists of our generation as well, and it is such an unfaithful adaptation. Like, it's almost completely unlike the original novel. Stanley Kubrick made the story even more sinister, even more illogical, even more unrealistic, and even less novel-like and more of a puzzle, of a riddle that's pretty messed up. And yes, Stephen King was pretty pissed off about this movie, in fact. So the plot is actually rather simple. A family consisting of the dad, Jack, the mom, Wendy, and their son, Danny, went to the Overlook Hotel, trapped themselves in the hotel, and then Jack slowly turned insane, slowly lost his sanity, and Danny sort of kind of knew that Jack would go insane, and so stuff's happened. Jack wanted to kill his family. And there are also other side characters. There is a man called Dick, and he is one of the people who works at the hotel, and both he told Danny about the Shining, which is basically an ability where it makes a person able to have precognitive visions, to predict what's going to happen in the future, and to know some sort of reality that others don't. And this movie is it's really cryptic, it's really abstract. Everyone has a different interpretation of the movie. They even made a documentary called Room 237 about the theories about the movie. And so I have my own interpretations. I think that both Dick and Danny also had The Shining, and that's why Dick had to be one of the side characters. Let's get to the basics of a good movie first. The acting is fantastic. Of course, Jack Nicholson, he is really good at playing angry. He's really good at playing insane. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm just going to bash your brains in. I'm gonna bash them right the fuck in. The actor for Danny is also pretty amazing, and the actor for Wendy is Shelley Duvall, and her acting is not great, but she is perfect for the role. Stanley Kubrick chose the perfect actress for the role, because if you have, done some research about The Shining, you will realize that Shelley Duvall is not your average actress. She also had this kids TV show, aside from starring in The Shining, and her performance in that kids TV show is probably just as eerie and off as she is in The Shining, where on every episode she says, "Hi, I'm Shelley Duvall," with the same face, the same tone, the same speed, and something's off about Shelley Duvall. Not only is something off about Wendy, but something is off about Shelley Duvall as well. And it's actually pretty messed up, pretty scary. Stanley Kubrick, while filming on the set, treated Shelley Duvall very, very harshly in order to make her super scared. Yeah, that's how much attention Stanley Kubrick paid to the details. And also, for some reason, it's a minor thing, but I noticed that the hands of Wendy and Danny are always shaking in the movie, trembling in some way. And I think, yeah, pretty scary, pretty eerie. There are also many other characters in the movie, but I think all of them are not real, including the twin girls who Danny kept seeing. And those twin girls are one of the most cryptic and abstract parts of The Shining. A lot of people actually had many different theories about the twin girls. So the reason why this hotel is pretty messed up and weird is because a brutal murder actually happened in the hotel before the story actually took place, allegedly. And Mr. Ullman, who was originally taking care of the hotel, but he sort of left at the very beginning of the movie, he told Jack that once there was a caretaker of the hotel who chopped up his wife and his two daughters and stacked them up nicely in room 237. And so yeah, something brutal happened in the hotel, and that's, I think, her two daughters, even though they have different ages, are basically represented by the twin girls in the movie, and Danny kept on seeing them because Danny kept on realizing that this murder is about to happen again, or is it? I have a theory of my own. And also we have other characters. Danny has another imaginary friend called Tony, who really possesses the shining ability. We have Lloyd and Mr. Grady, who are basically Jack's imaginations, in my opinion. And yeah, so Danny has this ability to realize what's going on, realize the reality before anyone else does, and he also has the ability to predict something before that something happens, but usually his visions are super chopped up. There had been this shot that happened quite a few times in the movie, and every time when that shot comes on, it's just there's something so intangible about this type of horror. This silence that just strikes you in the heart with pure fear, because not only do you not know what's happening, not only do you not understand it, you know something's wrong. You know something really brutal and really messed up is about to happen. And you see it right in front of your face. And then you see Danny's reaction going, and it's like, there's no way this is like humanly possible or realistically possible. Like something so brutal and bad is gonna happen that exceeds our perception of reality. And that shot is where loads of blood sort of come out of the elevator doors, and the elevator doors and the two floor dials actually resembles Danny's shocked face, and it's incredibly scary. It's incredibly scary in a very cerebral way. And also, there are tons of Easter eggs in this movie, and also little references here and there, and a little foreshadowing. Like there's a shot where Danny was sat on a chair, and there were these knives pointing at his head, and it sort of predicts what happens later on the last act of the movie. And we also constantly see naked women in the movie. Not constantly, but on multiple occasions, and all of them are really eerie and scary. It's like as if Stanley Kubrick believed that lust is part of the reason why we would mistake our reality as something else, or more like lust are also one of the factors that block our perception of reality. And we have Dick in his room, in his bedroom, with these two really weird naked women photos, and then we also have another naked woman who was young and pretty gorgeous in this bathroom in room 237 where Jack saw. And then suddenly this woman became super old and ugly, her skin sort of decomposing, and just can't unsee it. And there are also some really interesting scenes in the movie as well, like the scenes in the ballroom where Jack tries to have a drink and put his worries away. The first time he goes into the ballroom, actually the second time, it was completely empty and he wanted to drink. He closed his eyes, and when he opened it, a man was there, and he's Lloyd, and he's really non-human. He smiles like it's forced, and he acts so loyal to Jack. And the first time I watched the movie, I thought maybe he's real. But the second time I watched it, I realized that it's just a figment of his imagination. And so is Mr. Grady, who Jack sort of figured that he was the person who chopped up his wife and his daughters. And those two scenes are really scary, because scary and brilliant at the same time, because it confirms that not everything is real in the movie. Not everything you see is real. You really need to have this critical mindset when you look at this movie. I also forgot to mention that Mr. Grady is Jack. They are the same person. At least that is how I interpret the story. And there are also scenes where Jack gets bored and he sort of throws this ball and sort of bounce it around. And the way he throws the ball is actually really similar to the way he hacked the door with the axe later on in the movie. And it sort of foreshadows his actions as well. Sort of this boredom can drive people insane thing. And man, the red rum scene is also insane. So Danny and Tony sort of possesses the same human body, and even though Tony is said to be his imaginary friend, and Tony, actually, I think both Danny and Tony are indeed the same person, and Danny has the shining abilities, and he predicted that Jack would go insane and try to murder his family, and by and in order to warn Wendy, Tony used Wendy's red lipsticks to write red rum on the door. And when you look at it with the reflection of a mirror, it says murder. And then there's this crash zoom onto the murder, the word, and then there's this crash zoom onto Shelley's face. And it's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, that scene really, really messed me up. Again, it always impresses me how Stanley Kubrick manages to balance between art and story. His scenes are usually really spacey and full of ambiguity, but yet it pushes the narrative further. And also, the last act of the movie is absolutely suspenseful. Again, no jump scares, but it's the climax of the movie, and all the suspense and all the tension that had been building up since the very beginning had reached the top, and it's like, you know, something bad would be happening, and it is finally happening, and you still don't really know what it is, but you know it's there. And this fear of uncertainty really hits hard when everything's going down. And we have a scene where Wendy sort of went to Jack's table to check out his what he typed, and all the words he typed are basically all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and that's all he typed, and that line is being repeated over and over and over again on these paper. And this repetition, it's like, you know, it's like the movie is trying to force us to face the unknown fear, and it just makes the suspense even greater and more threatening. Also, because the family was trapped in the hotel, and the hotel was really weird, and you already know something's off with the hotel from the very beginning. So again, it's super claustrophobic, and it's like the movie is trying to force us to face this fear, to be trapped in this fear, and we couldn't do anything about it. The ending of the movie is absolutely iconic. The scene where Jack just hacks the door with the axe and says, "Here's Johnny!" That scene was one of the most iconic scenes in horror history. Yeah, and the poster for this movie isn't really Jack Nicholson. That's not the official poster. But because this scene is so iconic and Jack Nicholson delivered such a great performance, the poster, the widely known poster for The Shining, is actually this shot. And man, it's so suspenseful, that scene where Jack was so close to actually murdering his own family. And then he got distracted by Dick, who showed up in the hotel after realizing that something's going wrong. And here are my theories. Now, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert, but I'm sure that if you skip these spoiler parts, you won't know my interpretations of the movie. Like I said, I think both Dick and Danny also had shining abilities, and I think that Dick knew that this would be happening, and because he is an adult, he knows how to deal with it more than Danny does, or more like Danny has the shining abilities, but at the same time he's also kind of controlled by this evil, sinister force in the hotel, so he's sort of insane as well. So Dick knew that he had to save Wendy and Danny. But in order to do that, he had to die. He had to distract Jack and be killed. So that happened. And I think Dick sacrificed himself for Wendy and Danny, and I think he did it on purpose. Yeah. Other than that, the technical stuffs about the movie, they are amazing as well. The cinematography is breathtaking, especially for a movie that is released in 1980. The opening scene where we get this aerial view of the mountains and the roads is already a really stunning opening with the very simplistic and minimalistic opening credits. Really, really great use of symmetry in the movie. And, this is a very Kubrick thing, but usually when you're facing a hallway, the end of the hallway is always at the center, so you're always focusing at the center of the screen. And when something pops up at the center of the screen, no matter how far or how close, you will feel the same anxiety and tension. And also a lot of uses of mirrors in the movie, reflections showing that the reality may not be what you see. Maybe you need to look at reality in a different perspective, maybe. A lot of crash zooms and slow zooms. Crash zooms are usually a strike at your face because they are instantly scary, but slow zooms, they really build the suspense. You know something's up, you know something's wrong, and these slow zooms just make it so unsettling and so uncomfortable. The color schemes are fantastic. A lot of people said that the twin sisters, they had blue clothes, and there were shots of them being drenched in blood, so it's blue and red. And blue and red were also the colors that constantly showed up on Danny's clothings and Wendy's clothings. The bathroom in room 237 is mostly in green, while the bathroom in the ballroom is mostly red. So it's also sort of this Jack's mindset color scheme. And also the music is absolutely underrated. I feel like not enough people are talking about the soundtrack for The Shining because it is easily the most influential horror movie soundtrack of all times. It was the 1980s, and soundtracks back then aren't really that experimental, but the soundtrack for this movie, they are absolutely sinister, really noisy, abrasive, really heavy uses of scratchy, scorched guitar strings that are actually going insane. Like, not only are Jack, Danny, and Wendy going insane, the music itself are also going insane. And also these really faint chants. They're And finally, what I really, really love about this movie is that on the surface, this movie looks so simple and it seems so simple, but actually, if you look closer, there might possibly be so much else going on underneath. Themes of mental illness, including schizophrenia, themes of sexual assault, maybe themes of genocide of Native Americans, who knows, but there's a cockroach in my room. Yes, indeed, this movie is one of the most overanalyzed movies of all times. There are many different crazy conspiracy theories about how this movie is tied to the Illuminati, how this movie is tied to the faking of the moon landing, which I totally do not believe. I also do not believe about the whole Illuminati deal. But, Stanley Kubrick might have slipped in these ideas and these Easter eggs for a purpose. Maybe he's trying to play with us, fool with us. Maybe he's trying to freak us out a little bit. But Stanley Kubrick pays a lot of attention to detail, and no way there is one single thing about the movie, one single shot in the movie that Stanley Kubrick hadn't thought about for like 50 times. And there's something so interesting about the hotel. If you map out the hotel, you'll realize that this hotel is impossible. It doesn't make sense, like geographically and spatially. It doesn't make sense. It's if you map it out, everything's just it doesn't line up. Nothing really lines up. In the beginning, you have Mr. Ullman's office, which is being wrapped around by the hallway. But when Jack went into the office, there's a window in the office facing the outside. And okay, I have my own little theory about the window in the office of Mr. Ullman's. I think Jack and Mr. Ullman never really met, especially if you look at the photo at the very end of the movie where it is revealed that Jack was actually there in the hotel in 1921, meaning that when Mr. Ullman told Jack about the brutal murder in the hotel, that person was actually Jack. Jack came before Mr. Ullman. So that basically means that when Jack was in the hotel, the hallways wrapped around the office, but when Mr. Ullman was in the hotel, it was facing outside. So it sort of confirms that there are two different times taking place in the movie. But still, I just love the fact that the hotel just geographically doesn't make sense, because we are being literally shoved to our faces to face with what we had when all this is going down, and to realize that even our perception of reality isn't really real. There's also a huge detail in the movie that I really wanted to talk about, and that's the teddy bear. The teddy bear that Danny had in the very beginning, and then on one of the scenes, one of the shots at the last act, where Wendy suddenly saw this man in bear costume performing oral sex with another man. It's almost kind of hinting at the themes of sexual assault towards Danny, and not only any sexual assault, but almost pedophilia, which is just so uncomfortable and sinister, and there's so much more going on in the movie that you had to discover. And yes, I do have to talk about the ending. It was really smart. Jack was chasing after Danny when they entered the maze, and it was snowing, so Jack basically followed Danny's footsteps. And then at the end, Danny sort of backtracked his own footprints and sort of hid. And so Jack couldn't follow the footprints anymore, and he gave up and basically died of hypothermia. He turned to ice, basically, and that's actually really, really smart. And I just love the visuals and how suspenseful the ending is. And oh man, the elevator with the blood, just oh my gosh. And at the end, even though I have my own theories about the movie, I feel like there is an even deeper meaning to the movie. I don't think the movie has any moral, educational values. Neither do I think that this movie is a critique of anything of some sorts. I think this movie might be a warning from Stanley Kubrick to us, the people. I think Stanley Kubrick was trying to warn us that we cannot completely trust our perception of reality, because there are a lot of weird imageries in the movie, which are, a lot of them are fake, and there are so many scenes in the movie that sort of makes us question our own perception of reality, so we cannot really trust reality. If we completely trust our reality, maybe it will hurt our well-being. And so we need to always keep a critical mindset when it comes to perceiving the reality, what's really happening around us, and the people and the events. And yeah, that's just my interpretation. Feel free to tell me your interpretation of the movie in the comments. Anyway, this review is already long enough. I'm saying The Shining is absolutely scary and it's mind-blowing, and it's a 10 out of 10. So have you watched The Shining? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like if you like it, and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching.